Hello and welcome to Emotional Serenity group channel. Today there is another principle that I want to share with you. We discussed on our last video about the concept of the principle of happiness, or how we understood it in Emotional Serenity. Now I wish to discuss another very important principle, which is the concept or the principle of spirituality. And I understand that for some of you, when someone talks about spirituality or the spirit, that it may cause some doubts or fears, and it's completely understandable, because I believe for so long spirituality has been confused or intertwined with the concept of religion. And let's just leave this clear from now, that Emotional Serenity and the group does not endorse or support or promotes any particular set of religious beliefs or dogma. Okay, so we believe that the program is a spiritual program, and I will discuss now what that means, but we do not support or endorse any religion in particular. Now we welcome you, of course, to bring the joy and the experience you've had in your religion, in your own religious path or life, and that is perfectly fine. We want to invite everyone that brings principles of happiness into the group, but you need to understand that we're not endorsing any dogmatic set of beliefs. Okay, let me invite you to ask yourself, have you ever had that internal dialogue, right? Have you talked to yourself? And I'm sure you have. Whether you talk to yourself in conceptual words or images or memories, whatever it is, but have you talked to yourself? And have you had that dialogue where you have a fight or reward dialogue, like I can do this, or I don't deserve that? And have you hoped for things that you don't perceive now, as we discussed in earlier videos about faith and what it means really? Or have you ever been loved, or have you loved someone? And how can you explain the connection between the recipient of love and the giver of love? So when you talk to yourself, who is you and who is yourself? Or if you ever become, as Eckhart Tolle invites all of us to become the observers of ourselves. So who is the observer and who is the self? And are we talking about the same identity? And I believe we are talking about the same identity, just a different part of that identity. And what we believe in Emotional Serenity is that the duality of that identity is what we call the physical body and the spirit, or you can call it soul, or you may identify with it as a higher consciousness, or whatever it is, or your own consciousness. But there is a duality of what we receive from the senses and how we interpret it at the moral consciousness level, right? At the spiritual level, as we understand it. Now I understand that there are biochemical events that are happening in our bodies when we love or feel love, or when we fear or hope for things, or even when we talk to ourselves. I understand that those are the physical connections or the manifestations of what is going on the background on that duality of identity. But as we understand it in Emotional Serenity, spirituality or the spirit is that part of our identity that is not subject to time, to the temporal frame or space. It is and you may call, like I said before, a consciousness, or however you want to identify it. But the idea is that we believe that part of us is physical. We understand it and we perceive it through our senses. But there is a part of us, of our identity, essential identity, that is not felt, that it cannot be comprehended through time and space measurements. But why is this important? Why is spirituality important? Why do we consider that the program is defined as a spiritual program? Well, it becomes very clear when we go through the first or the early stages of the program, the 12-step program. And in step 2 and 3, we read the following. We come to believe, or we came to believe, that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And this greater or higher power, it's what often in the group or the therapy or the program is called God. You may call it God, or the power of the universe, or like I said, a higher consciousness, or Allah, or Buddha, or whatever you want to call it. But it is the idea that we are dependent upon that higher power, greater power than ourselves, that we depend on bringing back sanity to our lives and minds. And the third step reads that we made a decision to turn our will and our lives towards that, or over to the care of that God or higher power. So as we understand it or understood it at that period of time. And it is important that we clarify that it is that we turn over our will or our hope for recovery into the higher power as we understand it. And we will talk about it in future videos or blogs in our webpage as well, in terms of, you know, what is perception and reality, and how do we project ourselves. This is something that is very common when we go into the knowledge that is shared in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and perception is projection. So we will talk about this in the future, but it is important that we understand that spirituality, it is at the core, at the base of the program. We depend on a higher power to bring sanity to us, because now, as we've recognized through the first step, is that we are not in control of our own lives. So spirit and spirituality are at the core of the program. But what are some of the tools that we can use to perhaps identify with this dual or this other side of our identity? And again, I've quoted Eckhart Tolle because I think he's very clear in his book of the power of the now. And there are many great minds and masters that have talked about this plenty of times. But for those who have practiced transcendent meditation, and it is something that any form of meditation, it's one of the tools that we can use and we use in the program. And I invite you to try it all, because you can practice mindful meditation or transcendent meditation or dissociative meditation, whatever you use or have used. Those who practice that actually can relate and have experienced with that part of our identity that is no longer subject to the unconscious level of the senses, right? Of perception. When you practice, or those who have practiced, and I can share my own experience, and we will in the future videos, of how you feel free from the boundaries of your own body. So it helps to understand or to identify with that other part of your identity, to feel or to relate to it. And there's another one, obviously, that is very commonly used in the program, and that is prayer. And why is prayer important? Prayer, or if you want to describe it somehow else, it is the conscious communication with that higher power. It creates a sense of a bond with that higher power. So as we progress through the steps of the program, through meditation, but specifically through prayer, we become more and more acquainted with, and perhaps dependent on, and that is the hope, on that higher power that will allow us to free ourselves from the craziness of our emotional instability that we are right now. So prayer is a very important tool. And another tool that we use in the program is that of experience. Now, I understand that this is a vague concept, but I want to share with you that all of those who have or can share their spiritual experience is because they literally have experienced it. So we're not talking about conceptual or theoretical understanding. We have experienced that connection, that connectedness with the higher power, with our inner a spiritual identity, which is what connects to the higher power. And in my book, A Wonderful World of Neutrality, I share what I'm trying to define as the theory of knowledge. And it is important because in this quote that I put in my book, I summarize the concept of the theory of knowledge through this particular phrase. So, because there is information in all of these that we perceive through our senses, as we mentioned before. But let me share this quote, and this is what I want to leave you with. In the plane of reason resides information. In the plane of revelation resides knowledge. And in the plane of experience resides conviction. So there are 3 stages of that theory of knowledge, right? So we perceive information, and this is what happens through the reasoning and understanding through our minds, right? What we perceive through our minds and how we filter the information. But why we need this connection or this dependency on the higher power is because knowledge needs to be perceived through revelation. It is beyond what we perceive. For as long as we are perceiving information, we are filtering it based on our past experiences. It's not pure knowledge. We compartmentalize the information based on what we have experienced or what NLP or Gestalt will teach. But it is through revelation that we receive the greater knowledge, and it's only through experience that we can actually become convinced of this knowledge as part of our true reality. So this will be the invitation and the program as well. So thank you for being another week with us in Emotional Serenity. We invite you to come back and subscribe and hit the bell button so you can receive an update when we have new videos. And we invite you also to follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and to come to our blog where we discuss in more detail what some of the concepts that it will be better understood through the conversation and your comments. And you can visit us on emotionalserenity.com. So thank you for being with us.